broken like this beat. The economy is out of tune. It sounds so weird. Master clock is drifting, therefore the meter's shifting. The buffers are overloading. The controllers stopped decoding. Sound is clipping. You can hear glitches everywhere. The speakers reach their limits. It sounds completely overdriven. Now feedback takes control. Setup seems to freeze. There is no synchronization at all. The system seems to crash. I think we have to restart the machine. Otherwise, the speakers could explode. And then there would be a silence so fucking loud that you will hear the sustain for decades, and the decay will never fade away.
Ja, guten Abend. Willkommen zum zweiten Teil von HOTHOUSE, The Future of Demonstration. Die Veranstaltung wird auf Englisch stattfinden, auch deshalb, weil wir heute Gäste haben, zum Beispiel aus Gambia, aus Ungarn, aus Sri Lanka und aus London. Und ja, es werden noch 2 dieser Art von Veranstaltungen stattfinden, nämlich am 26. September und am 2. Oktober. Ich wünsche euch einen schönen Abend und gebe das Wort weiter an meinen Partner Gerald Nestler.
Danke. I'm just going to do the same in English, more or less, for all our guests who don't speak German. Welcome to the second evening of our series, HOTHOUSE, The Future of Demonstration, HOTHOUSE. This evening runs under the title, The Art of Composition, Collaborative Investigations Against Weaponized AI. We have fabulous guests, but we also have an MC that leads us through this evening, and I'm very happy that Siavash Eshki has taken over this role, and I just hand the micro to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gerald. Hi, everyone. My name is... Oh, it's okay. He can just play. We need him for the next generations of fighters. So yeah, my name is Siavash Eshki. I am from the Global Unit for Human Security of the Heinrich Böll Foundation. I coordinate the program here in Vienna. And today we have this event titled The Art of Composition, Collaborative Investigations Against Weaponized AI. So this evening we'd like to focus our attention on a topic that is a grave concern to many of us who worry about human security and also the well-being of vulnerable individuals and communities around the world. Artificial intelligence, a tool that many of us use on a daily basis, or willingly or not, helps us with a lot of tasks. But it's also being weaponized by states and non-state actors around the world in ways that are deeply, deeply worrying. It's now accepted, it's kind of an accepted fact of modern warfare, that algorithms and AI systems are being used to enhance military decision-making, efficiency, and targeting, edging us closer to a point where machines will be making life and death decisions. And that should worry all of us. In this process, as our esteemed panelists and participants, and they will join through different means, through video, through sound, and all sorts, and some of them also present in this room, actually. So they will demonstrate today lives and livelihoods of individuals, and at times entire populations are reduced and fragmented into data points. A dehumanizing process that contributes directly to committing the most heinous crimes known to mankind, including genocide. Disturbing rationalities and legal compositions are incorporated into AI models to facilitate this violence. We're here to ask some questions, and hopefully with the help of our participants, answer some of them, or at least begin to answer some of them together. What does it take to resist the abuses of power that are escalated to the scale of populations and nation states? What tools do we have at our disposal? How can counter-investigations and counter-alliances operate in order to successfully expose the use of AI models and infrastructures in conflicts? What would be the role of law in all of this? In order to answer all of these and to understand the better nature of the problem that we have at hand and explore pathways to resistance, we have with us 3 speakers, well, more than 3 speakers, but some of them my friend Marit will be introducing. But we have Julia Nueno-Guittard, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, who is a researcher and an engineer whose work explores how computational systems shape life and reorganize living space. She currently is a member of the investigating team at the Forensic Architecture and a PhD candidate at the Center for Research Architecture at Goldsmith University, London. We have Dr. Rebecca Minio Mahdevi, who's joining us. You will be hearing her sound in the room only. An assistant professor of international law at Sciences Po Law School, and she's currently working on international law, international legal theory, and digital security law and governance. And we have with us in the room Marit Seyer, who's a lawyer and the founder and chairwoman of the campaign to Stop Killer Robots Austria, which is the Austrian branch of the international campaign to stop killer robots. And she will be introducing 4 other members of the international campaign who will be joining us through Point Cloud, as you will see them on these marvelous screens around us. And without further ado then, I'm going to give the floor now to Julia to start the night. There you go, Julia.
Thank you. On the 29th of October of 2023, a video of a young Palestinian in Gaza went viral on TikTok. He's reporting after a telecommunications cutout about fuel shortages in Gaza City and power cuts, which are driving the population out on the streets and lining up and queuing at bakeries. A few days after, Al Jazeera published a second video of a bombing in a bakery called Al-Sharq Bakery. Using the architectural features of both of these videos, these bakeries can be placed. This video of the queue seems to be the same pointing to the same bakery that is attacked with the Al Jazeera video. During the months of October and November, forensic architecture documented the attack on 17 bakeries in Gaza. Some of them, like Families Bakeries, had their solar panels attacked and targeted. Some of them, like Nusayrat Bakery or Al Jadid Bakery, were completely destroyed, where a crater was left in place where the building used to be. These strikes in bakeries were happening also as there was an evacuation order that ordered 1.1 million Palestinians to evacuate the north of Gaza and displace towards south. These airstrikes were concentrated in the areas of the north and the areas of the middle of Gaza. The way that these bakeries were targeted at the time, it didn't seem like this was just a random targeting because the areas around them weren't destroyed, although much of it will be destroyed later. What we can observe with repeated targeting of bakeries is perhaps a shift in the way Israel justifies its actions under international humanitarian law. In past wars, the military often used what we could call an economy of violence, working out how many civilian deaths were acceptable in order to hit a target. International law, which is meant to limit violence, plays a key role, actually, in calculating and managing violence through its principles of distinction between militant and combatant and proportionality, how many civilians can be killed for a deemed target. So, for instance, when we think of the 2021 war in Gaza, Israel claimed that phone calls were a form of proportionality. By giving residents a few minutes to evacuate before their homes were destroyed, they argued that civilian harm was then reduced. But another tactic is possible within this logic, which is to change who counts as a civilian. When the ratio of civilians to militants is too high, as it is usually in dense urban areas, civilians can be reclassified as combatants to justify the strike. The wide-scale destruction that we have seen in Gaza, including the killing of health workers, journalists, civil servants, 8 distribution organizers, suggests that this strategy is what's being used at the moment. So if you expand who and what counts as a military target, then mass killings can be presented as both legal and necessary. What is today the fastest way of creating that big base of alleged combatants and militants is through AI. In November 2023 and later in January, the journalist Yuval Avraham exposed the Israel military's deployment of artificial intelligence systems to automate the process of target selection in Gaza. There were three systems that he was describing. Gospel, which marks buildings and structures that allegedly serve a military function. Lavender, that creates a human target with a database of virtually every adult male in Gaza, assigning them a rating of between 1 and 100 on how likely they are to be part of armed resistance. And Where is Daddy, which marks civilian homes when a target goes back to their residency. I want you to note, as we will be seeing now, how this economy of violence operates. When we think about a rating between 1 and 100, I don't know if you see here that there's no zero score. So that means that everyone has a score assigned of guilt. So there's no presumption of guilt. There's no possibility of not being guilty. Following this article, there was denial by the Israeli military of the use of such systems, although a few months later, in May 2024, they awarded, the IDF awarded, government awarded the Israeli Defense Forces for the use of their target factory. It was also around that time that a senior official of the army told that the IDF had now the capacity to generate new targets faster than it can strike them. Apparently, in the 2014 and 2021 wars, Israel had run out of targets while bombing Gaza. So targets and the generation of new targets seemed to be a bottleneck to their military operations. So what we see now is how AI is being used to automate a justification process of a form of carpet bombing within Gaza. We have to think that military doctrine is not reduced to combat, but includes the strategic management of information, deciding what is revealed, what is hidden, and today how a narrative of legitimacy is constructed in the eyes of the public and through legal frameworks. During the first month of the aerial campaign in Gaza, 25,000 tons of explosives were thrown from the air. Around 10,000 people were killed just between October and beginning of November. 70% were children and women. Within forensic architecture, we decided to bring an analysis of this bombing campaign and analyze the geographical and temporal distribution of airstrikes. So what we did was collect data on social media, posts and reports on social media that were reporting about incidents, and virtually correct every possible incident that was reported around that period. Once we had that incident, we classified the kind of structure that was struck, how many people were killed in that airstrike, anything that we could know about the munition, and we used the visual evidence, so images and videos, to geolocate the exact position of that airstrike. The map that you see here is the map of airstrikes between 7th of October and 28th of October 2023. Our database collects around 1,000 airstrikes, and we could exactly pinpoint to their exact coordinates and locations around 400 of them. The rest we had an approximate location for. So one of the conclusions that we got with this investigation was that bombs rarely kill only their intended targets. So what we saw is that at nighttime, it was more likely to see airstrikes in residential areas when it's more likely than civilians are home. While during daytime, it was more likely to see airstrikes in markets or bakeries or commercial areas when it was more likely also to have civilian presence. Another of the conclusions that we got to is that once people were told to evacuate to the south of Wadi Gaza, after the 13th of October, the number of airstrikes in the south started increasing respect the previous period. So once again, we see that airstrikes happen where there's higher civilian presence. These bombs rarely kill only their intended target. The act of individualization, naming someone, scoring them, flagging their location, becomes a justification for a violence that radiates outwards, destroying homes, killing relatives and neighbors, collapsing social ties, and making whole areas uninhabitable. This is what I'm tentatively calling individuated mass killing. The way that target an individual becomes the method through which mass killing is achieved. In May 2021, the then Israeli Major General Aviv Hoshavi stated that the AI made the idea of killing more moral because we have now an address for every bomb that is dropped in Gaza. The idea is that precision itself is a kind of moral shield. If a bomb is aimed at a specific point on a map, the acts then should not be questioned. Instead, what we see with this system of the target factory is that it's creating an alibi for the future, for the legal justification of the killing of thousands of people. So, rather than reducing at all civilian deaths, what these systems are being used for is to accelerate the killing of civilians. Yes.
So we now have a pause in this presentation. We'll come back to it, and it's actually it's a good way of shifting, because one of the factors that we could hear in the presentation of Julia was like actually kind of the intertwined nature of law and what is happening. So now what we want to do, we want to hear it from Rebecca, her statement about this and about how law and AI in this kind of space are intertwined and what she thinks of it. Rebecca? Can you hear me, Rebecca?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Siavash. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well.
I want to build, and I'm grateful for Julia's powerful account on which I want to build of AI-enabled economies of violence. And I want to tell you yet another story of warfare, when the obsession is to anticipate so-called threats. The story of anticipatory warfare is, and I think you sense it already through the story that Julia shared with you, is a story of infinite violence in time and space, under the disguise of precision. I want maybe to invite you to imagine a scene, and if it helps, feel free to close your eyes. You can imagine yourself in a different context, in a Peul village in central Mali, for instance. The sun is low, the air thick with dust and anticipation, and today is a wedding, a moment of celebration, tradition, community gathering. And in Peul culture, weddings are really vibrant, deeply ritualized. Women and girls gather in one courtyard, singing, braiding hair, preparing food. And men, fathers, brothers, cousins, friends, convene under the shade of a tree, away from the women, as is customary for a while during the celebration. And they talk, they share news, sometimes as is the tradition, in fact, in regions marked by insecurity. They also carry rifles and hunting weapons openly. Not for attack, but for protection, and also, as you can imagine, as a visible sign of adulthood, of responsibility. So the separation of men and women is not suspicious here. It is ritual. The gathering of men, sometimes large, is not a sign of conspiracy, but here it's a sign of celebration. In Peul weddings, men, in fact, may gather for hours waiting for the bride to arrive, performing music, recounting ancestry, negotiating dowries. And the open display of weapons, again, is part of rural life, a precaution in a region where banditry and conflict are never really far away. But above, a drone circles, maybe supported by AI-enabled systems, and the sensors of the drone record the cluster of men, guesses their age approximately, and identifies their weapons. So far away, here is this algorithm that analyzes the scene. A group now identified as military-aged males, unusually gathered, carrying arms in a region marked on intelligence maps as hotspots. And the system does not know it is a wedding. Remember, the obsession is to anticipate threats. So it sees them wherever, whenever there is something that culturally is understood in this other part of the world, the minority world, as risky, as suspicious. And it does not understand custom, the Pearl custom. It sees risk. And so the decision is made. A strike is ordered, and in an instant, the celebration turns to tragedy. Men are killed, the same fathers, sons, cousins I mentioned, because they gathered, and their gathering is misread. Their weapons is seen as proof of combat. Julia mentioned how the principle of distinction in IHL is reshaped, accompanying this techno-legal machinery. The wedding is shattered, not only this wedding, but the ones that will be celebrated afterwards, if at all. And it's shattered by the violence of a narrative that is constructed elsewhere, by operators, algorithms, and by the law itself. You and your neighbors learn over time to change your rituals. Men gather in smaller groups, not at all. Weddings lose their music, their stories, their joy, or at least for a while. And the drone program, the AI-enhanced machinery, and the law behind it, the legal narratives, have reshaped tradition itself. You can open your eyes or escape the projection, the horrific, horrendous projection that I invited you to embark on. This is not an aberration. It is, and it's not also a phenomenon that takes place outside what is legally accepted. It is the result of legal concepts. Here, the concept of continuous combat function that was crafted, wait for it, by the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross itself, to clarify who may be targeted, but which in practice enables states to justify their strikes, their anticipatory strikes, that are conducted not for acts of violence, not to react to so-called direct participation in hostilities, as we would call it in international humanitarian law, but for patterns of life, for rituals, for customs understood and read as risks, signs of suspicious behaviors. So the law that is often presented as a shield becomes here the architect of suspicion and makes really invisible as well the suffering that these techno-legal machineries create. So in my research, I have traced how the US, how France, among others, have used this concept and other many sophisticated legal narratives to extend the scope of war, of violence indefinitely in time and space. Prior to October 7th in 2023. So what Julia described is really rooted in sophisticated, although highly contestable, of course, legal rationales, legal language that has been mobilized by these other states to allow or try to legitimize their violent practices. And here target selection is really no longer about witnessing any hostile acts, it's about assembling fragments of contexts, of patterns of life, associations, behaviors. And the result, of course, is strikes that are putting civilian populations at high risk. And this machinery is modular, scalable, devastatingly stable and efficient. So what is our task? It's not only to mourn, to critique, but I believe to intervene as well, to mobilize legal vocabulary that can serve to counter this violence, but also to re-grammar law's vocabulary of violence. We must, in a way, although we can be very cynical and critical of the law, the role played by the law in this techno-legal machineries, we can demand or act in favor of legal architectures that requires evidence, that assembles evidence of violence, that makes visible lived suffering. We can imagine a legal grammar that does not merely count the dead, as Julia was powerfully sharing, but sees the living, sees the rituals, sees the traditions, the chronic harms, the slow violence that is not accounted for when we talk through the terms of proportionality, necessity, distinction, as they are interpreted today. The stakes here, of course, are not only technical, not academic, they are existential. To re-grammar law is to reclaim the possibility that justice might mean more than efficient management of violence, as IHL has historically allowed us to do. Thank you for your attention and looking forward to the discussion later.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for this really thought-provoking statement, which really connects beautifully the presentation of Julia to the presentation of someone who is very, very familiar to the legal struggle and creating a legal language and the legal kind of forms of resistance, both in here and internationally. Marit.
Thank you. Thank you also very much for those amazing statements. As you heard before, I am part of the campaign to stop killer robots. Who are we? We are a global coalition of organizations and lots of people around the world working to ban autonomous weapons. We believe that while we hand over so many decisions already to machines, to artificial intelligence, there is one line that we should never cross, and that is handing over the decision over life and death. And why is it so important that we are actually all over the world, that you can find us in each corner? It's because this is something that will affect everyone and all of us, and that is why everyone from around the world raises their voices. This will not be contained to the battlefield. This will be definitely something that we all have, hopefully not to get used to. So, being a campaign is great, so that's why I was able to bring you some experts to demonstrate how far-reaching we are. So thank you very much for being here. Selina Barry, here to my left. She's the communications lead for Stop Killer Robots, and she's joining us from London. And then, further away, definitely, we have Yanitra Kumaraguru. Hopefully I pronounced that right. She's an attorney at the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, and she is the coordinator of the Stop Killer Robots campaign in Sri Lanka, and I believe she's in Colombo right now. And then, am I missing two other people? Is it the three of us? Apparently. Okay, no, that's good. No, it's a girls' night only now. Okay, so we, apparently there were some difficulties with the boys from Hungary and Africa. So, but I think we can definitely handle this. Okay, so since I have the experts, I'm just going to ask some questions. And I think I'm just going to start with a warm-up round. So I think it's really important, since we are activists and we work towards a cause, to talk about why we want to do this, why we want to stop killer robots. And for me, personally, if I think about that, I think about how I want to raise my kids. When my two little kids, when they hurt someone, they have consequence and responsibility. Consequence means they're not going to watch TV for a week, and they have to apologize. Consequence and responsibility. And as they grow older, eventually grow a brain, get bigger hearts, you also have the human part, that you actually don't want to hurt another human being. And then for all of the other people, there is the law, consequence and responsibility. And now imagine all of this is erased. A machine does not have a conscience. It doesn't care about any consequences. It doesn't care about going to prison. So if anyone tells me that there's going to be less suffering, less collateral, less killing, if machines decide who lives and who dies, the only thing I can do is laugh and say you're lying to yourself and you're lying to me too. Okay, let's start with this easy question. Janitra, why do you want to stop killer robots?
Marit, I think for me it ties in with what you said. In a lot of ways, the human rights violations that the use of autonomous weapons would bring, the violations of humanitarian law, and mostly the ethical concerns and the injustice that it would carry with it, is my basis for working towards a ban on autonomous weapons.
Thank you very much. That's a good one. Selina, same question.
Thanks, Merit. So for me, it's quite simple. I want to stop killer robots because I believe that life or death decisions should not be handed over to machines. And also because I believe that technology should be used to promote peace, justice, human rights, rather than increasing conflict and inequality.
Great. Okay, that was the warm-up round. So let's get to the juicy bits. I have questions prepared for each one. And since we had 4 speakers, let's see if I'm going to annoy you with some more questions afterwards. So, Selina, beyond the technical details, of which we heard a lot already at the other statements, why should the public care about autonomous weapons? And how do we make this issue understandable and urgent for society at large?
Sure. So, sort of drawing on what I just said about my own personal motivations, the public should care about autonomous weapons because life or death decisions shouldn't be handed over to machines. Autonomous weapons, or killer robots, as we like to call them within the campaign, undermine human control over the use of force, and in the circumstances where these machines target people rather than structures or other sanctioned military targets, the autonomous weapons dehumanize us and reduce us to data points. Autonomous weapons also embody the extreme and lethal consequences of the changing relationship between people and technology. So we're already seeing how swiftly and significantly our relationship with tech can be altered. From personalized social media algorithms, ChatGPT, and the incorporation of AI in daily life, to the use of predictive policing at protests or public gatherings, and as has been covered by our other speakers, the AI-powered military tools used to generate lists of targets to strike in the conflict in Gaza. I'm speaking about the Lavender system specifically here. We can see that technology is rapidly altering the way we live, and we need regulation to catch up with innovation. So it's very clear from the trajectory that we're on, and the other artificial intelligence and autonomous decision-making we're seeing in our lives in the battlefield, that autonomous weapons cannot be classed as a future problem. We're seeing reports of weapons with concerning autonomous capabilities and military AI tools being developed and used in the conflict, and used in current conflicts in Gaza, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, and Yemen, all with devastating humanitarian impacts. So it's clear that we are quickly normalizing the automated harm and the detachment of people from military decision-making. And crucially, like other tools that have been deployed for military conflict, these tools, these autonomous weapons, won't be limited to the battlefield, but they will inevitably be used in policing and border control operations. With increased government and private investment in these tools, the question of autonomous weapons is no longer an if, but a when. So how do we make this issue understandable and urgent for society at large? Well, to make the issue understandable, there's a phrase that we use again and again in our campaigning at Stop Killer Robots, and that's that machines shouldn't be allowed to kill people. And you don't need to be an expert in artificial intelligence, weapons, or international law to understand why that's problematic. Additionally, we also try to make autonomous weapons more broadly understandable through the concept of digital dehumanization. So digital dehumanization is the process whereby humans are reduced to data which is then used to make decisions and or take actions that negatively affect their lives. Autonomous weapons are an extreme example of this, and that's because autonomous weapons do not see you, they don't see people as human beings, but instead they sense them as a collection of data points that may or may not fit whatever target profile has been programmed into them. So if someone does meet the target profile, if the data that the machine senses from them does meet that target profile, then the autonomous weapon would apply force. The machine would kill someone, and no human would be involved in this life or death decision. So that leads me to another useful phrase that we use in our work, and that's just referring to these weapons as killer robots, because in essence, that's what they are. And without delving into the technicalities of how these machines operate, the phrase killer robots evokes a visceral and human reaction that these machines are wrong and that they shouldn't be allowed to be used on people or otherwise.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just a quick thing to see if everyone listened. Okay. By a show of hands, do you think there is actually sufficient law against autonomous weapons? No hands. Perfect. Okay. Okay, Yanitra, please be quick because time is passing. From a humanitarian law and human rights perspective, what do autonomous weapons challenge that no other weapons have before?
Thanks, Mariette. So I think firstly, I would highlight that they undermine human dignity, which is something that would underlie both human rights law and humanitarian law. And this is in a way that no weapon has kind of done before. Why do I say that? Because it involves the delegation of life and death decisions to machines, as we have been discussing. But secondly, autonomous weapon systems, in the manner that they use data to make decisions, in their inability to truly be able to contextualize, human nature and understand human behavior, through the biases that can enter this system, whether it's intentional or unintentional, for example, through whatever training data may be used for the machine or the system. Through all these aspects, they can also, and they will also, infringe several human rights, such as the right to equality or non-discrimination, whichever way you wish to put it, the right to life, and the right to privacy. And at the same time, principles of humanitarian law will also be violated. The principle of distinction was already referred to in our presentations previously. The necessity during a conflict to be able to distinguish between combatant and civilian, that is something that is going to be violated. Similarly, civilian property and military property. And if distinction as a principle is unable to be upheld, it is natural that then that kind of spills over into the other two cornerstone principles of humanitarian law, which is proportionality, which was also mentioned, that military advantage has to be balanced with, any loss of civilian life or property that may happen, and also that of precaution in an attack. But let me just clarify what I meant there, in that a lot of these concerns I just mentioned in human rights and humanitarian law could also arise in relation to other weapons which do use technology. So why did I cite these as reasons, that go in terms of autonomous weapons as opposed to any other weapon system as well? I would say that there are at least three things that set apart autonomous weapons in this regard compared to other weapons that use technology, and thereby render these challenges more significant than usual. The first of these would be the compounding of all these concerns when it comes to autonomous weapons in particular, as compared to these other weapons, because of the complete removal of human review in target selection and engagement, so on. The second one is what is sometimes termed as the accountability gap or the responsibility gap that prevails as a result of having a machine in charge. And consequently, the impact that this could have on the right to a remedy that any victim could have, whether in a human rights context or humanitarian law context. And lastly, what is sometimes termed as the double black box effect, where depending on the technology that is involved, the fact that it is not sometimes possible to glean exactly why or how a machine has come to its decision, or an algorithm did come to its decision. And secondly, as a secondary black box, the fact that military affairs in themselves carry a layer of secrecy. And I think these three together then compound these concerns and add another layer, which really highlight the challenges that come across in terms of a human rights and humanitarian law background.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've been told that Ilesh can communicate with us. Are you ready for your question? Does that work?
Yes.
Perfect. So the next time you just take the train from Budapest, you're actually right around the corner. Yes. Okay. So looking at Europe today, what role can young people play in shaping the political debate on autonomous weapons? And what conversations are still missing here? Can you do that in a couple of sentences?
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for having me. It seems like technology doesn't want me to show my face via this virtual server. Maybe they want to prevent me from stopping killer robots. I don't know. I started campaigning against fully autonomous weapons when I was 16. So I was a high school student. Now I am a student of law in Budapest. And I've been doing this campaign for 6 years, and most of the work has been on education and awareness raising. We are focusing especially on young people. So we went from high schools to university colleges of advanced studies and other communities to talk about killer robots and artificial intelligence more generally. But besides that, also we have engaged with political decision makers from the governing party of Hungary. It was not an easy catch. In Hungary, it's not an easy thing to have someone respond to your emails. So it's a hard thing to do. I don't know how it's in other countries. But what I have experienced is that people are actually interested in this topic, and when you approach them with the right sense of dialogue, or you're looking on what their point of view can be and how you can convince them, then people are very much open. And even though they would not, tell you in the face, but you see the results. So, for example, in 2021. The Hungarian parliament adopted a new law of national defense, which was the previous law was in the 1990s, and in the new law of national defense, they included autonomous weapons specifically. And there is a requirement in Hungarian law that the use of autonomous weapons should be, if possible. So we still have to work here, but what the law says, if possible, with human control. Which is not a small achievement. And it's not something that we achieved via a political party, but through a number of academic and other institutions. Of course, we are not the only people who are talking about this, but we have been a significant voice in Hungary. What I want to say with this is that young people should not be afraid to use their opportunities, to use all the ways possible. Because we have been rejected quite a few times, either by not responding, people not responding to us, or saying that this is not something that they're interested in. I have been in a few situations where I shook hands with someone and they said, "Oh, I'm not interested." But consistent work does have results in basically any setting. And I think we as young people have a lot to say, not only in Hungary, but all around Europe. Young people have a lot to say. But I feel even in my circle of friends that it's very hard for us to say anything because we feel that we are not welcome to say the things. And we should not be afraid of that. So I think the main message that I would have in this campaigning is that, first of all, you have to move for dialogue instead of fights. So we have in this world today, if you look around politics, we have enough fights. We have to go for dialogue. This may sound as something which is if you are scared, but this is not the case. We want people to internalize our message. Then we have to be consistent, and we should not be afraid of saying what we believe in. And with this methodology, sort of, or with this attitude, I think we can achieve much in any political setting.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are the campaign to stop killer robots. If the red line is ever crossed, at least we gave it our best. We only didn't do our job if it's crossed silently.
Yeah, listen closely. Yeah. 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 Listen, 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 listen. Yeah. Say, I don't hide my face. I came to reveal this like deep amniocentesis, piercing the box and get you beneath this. The surface meaning, misinformation had you awake dreaming, then crooked to past and system maintained and chained by constant concealment. It's about time to avoid being lenient. We must break the black box. Make it break, make it speak, make it speak, make it. So is it you who watches things just the wheel of Monday to weekend? Stop being and leaning your pain in it. Yeah, find your cage pretty convenient, like big rats, big dats. I kept running and streaming, uncertainty flowing to your body like your voice when you break the box with my karate. Tracking codes, cookies, AI. We got to multiply to defy, but buy side, sell side. Which side do you apply? Social impact to this construction. Yeah, yeah. From trader to educator. Yeah, you can find what emancipates her, interrogate her, but you can never break her. She's the 1%, not the 99. Yeah, she's the trigger that blows your cover and mind. Yeah, she's the whistleblower, deep naughty. Say, are you that somebody? I embrace that risk. Do you all share in? Yeah. Say, I don't have a face, I just came to bring clearance like recalibration. Every frequency functions like Chinese needle punches. Flow like water with tranquility to money market volatility, diminishing your liquidity. It all falls into place in the end. When your executor loses its mask, are you there to bitter ask? Regret, fraud, expose, and gold. Spread information, regain your deserved wealth. Technological arms races happening while you scroll your gadget for entertainment purposes, keeping you short-sighted and malfunctioning like a circuit disc. Uncertainty flow into your body like your voice when you break the box with my karate. Tracking codes, cookies, AI. We got to multiply to defy, but buy sides, sell sides. Which side do you apply? Social impact to deconstruction. Need more knowledge production. From trader to educator, power emancipates her, but you cannot break her. Yeah, she's the 1%, not the 99. She's the trigger to blow your cover and mind like a detonator. She's the whistleblower, deep naughty. Are you that somebody? Yeah, I embrace the risk. Do you all share in? Yeah, say, get informed to win.
Thank you, Solkat. So I want to go back again to Gaza one moment and think of what followed the bombing campaign that I was talking about on October and November. It was the massive displacement of the population. I think that's been one of the characteristics of this genocide, that you probably all know, how the population was first transferred from north to south, from south to east, from east to the center, to the north, and back again now. There's an evacuation of 1.4 million people in Gaza City. These evacuations have been structured with an evacuation grid that the Israeli military imposed. And the things that I'm going to be looking at now is, we've been talking about these AI systems that make decisions, that put a score on an individual in order to convert it into a target. I want to look at some of the ways that these systems are making such decisions. So, as I'm saying, this is the evacuation grid in Gaza, and it divides the Gaza Strip in 620 blocks. This was published as an interactive map in the Israeli Defense Forces website. And this is all the areas of Gaza that had received evacuation orders by September 2024. So, along with this evacuation grid came a form of evacuation orders. Already in October, before the grid was imposed, these were dropped with drones over the population. And what these evacuation orders say is that anyone that doesn't follow the order will be considered a terrorist. So if we think about what this evacuation order is saying, is that basically, if you don't leave, and the reasons why you don't leave are many, you might not leave because you're injured, you might not leave because you want to stay with your family, or you might not leave because you don't want to leave your home, because there's no safe space outside it anyway. This flattens the reasons of staying into one binary decision, terrorist or not terrorist, right? So what we see is that this is then what is fed into this algorithm. Someone that stays behind is then more likely to be a terrorist or to become a target. So we are seeing that your political decisions, your decisions are flattened into a binary form. So, next slide. So also, last year there was it was published that Brigadier General Yossi Sariel had written a book in his year abroad at the Defense University of Washington. He's a member of the Israeli Defense Forces, and this is his master's thesis that you can download from Amazon. It's called the Human-Machine Team, and in it, he argues for a synergic learning between humans and machines to create supercognition. And what he is proposing is that these systems, the target factory, can synthesize traditional intelligence by informants on the ground with the intelligence gathered from WhatsApp groups of the population. So he was proposing that the WhatsApp groups of the population in Gaza were accessed, and if anyone is in a WhatsApp group with an alleged member of the armed resistance, then that person can be considered as a terrorist. Actually, what has been shown later is that you don't even need to access the WhatsApps of the population, that there is a breach in WhatsApp that basically allows governments to see who you are messaging. So you might not see the content of the message, but if I send you a message, then there is a link created between us. So let's think about this on the first weeks of the bombing campaign, when I was talking earlier about the queues in bakeries. So bakeries were long and public, and then if you're standing in a bakery and your phone is linked to a suspect, that might be enough for proximity to reclassify you as a target. So once you're flagged, the decision to strike though, and this is what's very important to remember, that this targeting system proposes targets, but the decision to bomb is that of the military. And in the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, the plan was to push all the population to Rafah so they could be displaced and expulsed from Gaza into Egypt. So then the decision on whether to strike or not strike that line of a bakery is a human decision. So we need to think about the way that these AI systems are not only targeting individuals, but they're targeting social life, they're targeting social spaces, the way that life and tradition is built. That's a bit also what Rebecca was saying. That moment of gathering in Mali is a moment of collective life, and that creates links between people that then are used to turn them into potential targets. But then furthermore, something else that we have seen with the displacement in Gaza is that as people were told to move south, there were biometric checkpoints that were established in different points. So in Salahuddin Street, which is the central street in Gaza, there was a biometric checkpoint established on the 14th of November of 2023. Similarly, you can see from satellite imagery these queues of people, and they're going through these, you can see on the image on the right, these containers that contain facial recognition cameras. You can see the same happening in Mawasi, which is the so-called humanitarian zone. So what we're seeing here is that actually displacement is being used to surveil the population. You go through a facial recognition checkpoint, then you're marked, and these are not so much checkpoints that are seeing who is going through, but they're also trying to assess who's staying behind, right? So you're trying to see what is the population that is staying behind, and you're marking new relationships. So the repeated displacement of people groups people in new ways that creates new networks between them. So you can create new links that create new targets. At the beginning of the war, Israel said that their target factory had found 40,000 Hamas militants. 3 months ago, they said that there were 40,000 Hamas militants that the target factory had just found. So what this AI system is being used for is actually to perpetuate war, to justify that war must continue in front of the Israeli public. It's not so much another thing than a way of justifying the war of the future. So a bit to think on the terms that Rebecca was proposing on how we need to think of another international law that allows us to think beyond the terms of proportionality and to rationalize and economize violence. I think we also need to push on our own terms to describe this system. So we have to talk about the ways that they are using forms of acceleration, they are reducing political intent into a spatial condition. So we have to move the terms beyond what the manufacturers sometimes speak about, which is precise systems. It's not a question whether they're precise or they're not precise. It's a question of what the spatial and material evidence is telling us of the level of destruction. In the same way, it's not a question whether they're biased or they're not biased, whether they're confusing whether someone could be a terrorist or not. But it's more about foregrounding and investigating the ways and the logics that these decisions are made and how they are abstracting conditions of life into parameters that are fit then to criminalize a population.
fashion designer. It's vegan. Look at this detail here. I'm very proud of it. And look at this here. Handmade. One of a kind. Look at this here. Self-curated. Radical. Relevant. And cute. And it keeps me warm in the winter and in summer. But you know, I want you to see me as I really am. Who am I? It's just a mask. Makeup. It's made of silicone. It's awesome. What's your weapon made of? And you? What's your weapon made of? And you? Is it judgment? Or just superior morality? Take it off, darling. Take it off. We don't need this between us. Much better, or? You know, I'm also a musician. I'm a radical musician. A poet. I know how to take words and put them together and make them rhyme. I don't know, I just get inspiration from big words I hear around. There is a lot of words around here. I'm so grateful for language. Oh my God, I just wrote a song. It's called Gratitude. I'm a singer-songwriter.
Homicide, suicide, genocide, terrified, mortified, justified, genocide. Countryside, unified, all beside, worlds collide, by my side, let it slide, genocide.
Gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daphne, for that wonderful and provoking performance. So we have a few more minutes left to just have a short conversation between our panelist presenters, people that are part of this conversation. I'll turn to Rebecca first because I know that she has to leave soon. And I'm just going to ask the question that kind of gave rise to the talk, to the event today, which is, what should we do? How can we bring our forces together? What would be a good strategy to kind of coordinate from your perspectives? I know different people have touched on it, but Rebecca, please, from your perspective, how should we, as actors, as citizens, as individuals, get together and fight this?
Yeah, thank you so much, Siavash. And I think the answer partly lies in words, the use of words. I talked about legal grammar earlier and was quite critical of it, but actually words rule the world, and to speak in legal terms is to intervene in the machinery of perception that we've all been talking about. When we name a harm, when we call a pattern of violence genocide, we do more than describe. We activate a system of accountability, we summon the world's attention, we make suffering legible, actionable, and this is why I think legal language matters, and I've heard it also in the different performances. And some have argued that to use the word genocide in the context of Gaza, as the International Court of Justice did in January 2024, warning of the risk was premature, was even reckless, but the convention that is at the heart of this qualification, the Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of Genocide, is not only about punishment after the fact, as the title says, it is about prevention. So it's not only that we can use the word genocide early, it is that we must use it early. Not only states, but every one of us, every one of you listening to this. And the delay in naming is not neutrality, it is partly complicity in the genocide enterprise. And the early use of legal language accompanied with visible evidence, as forensic architecture does, for instance, is a mode of techno-legal resistance that is, I think, as powerful as the techno-legal governance that enables violence that we've all been talking about.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm going to now turn to Marit, who's also not unfamiliar with campaigning and fighting. And if you don't mind, the people who are joining us from Point Cloud, because we have a limited amount of time, I'm going to have Marit represent you as the speaker on behalf of the Stop Killer Robots. I do apologize because we're running a little bit over time. Marit.
Okay, thank you much. Same question, I guess. I really, really love that answer. Words. It's words is amazing. It's what we need. We need words, but we also need the people who speak those words. We need every single one to actually go talk about this topic, talk to everyone, and then, of course, everyone who was here last Friday, they know I love questions. So words ask questions. Ask questions to each other, ask questions to the government, to the lawmakers. Ask them online. Why should I live in a world where a machine decides who lives and who dies? Why should we actually agree to this? Why should we be okay with this? We are the people, this is about us, and this is why we, together with words and questions, we need to step up. Come to those discussions, maybe follow the campaign to stop killer robots online to see how you can help. And yeah, just talk to each other. And yeah, let's just take it from there.
Thank you so much. Oh, the machine is saying something. Feels left out. Now, Julia.
Thank you. I think in these last few months there's been very successful campaigning against arms companies. We have to think of a scenario that we are now where actually countries are rearming and they're increasing their budgets on weapons. There's been very effective actions in the UK blocking arms factories and picketing on arms factories. I think one of the actions that we can maybe think about taking more is an action of blockage. Right now, there's been some seafarer workers that have been saying that if the flotilla is attacked, the flotilla that is bringing humanitarian aid in Gaza, they will block the port of Genova. So we have to start thinking of these actions of blockage towards those arms company. At the same time that we think of words and we think of the legal arguments that we have to build, I think there needs to be a legal front to be fought, but also a civil movement and an economic movement blocking these arms companies.
Okay, so on that note, I'm going to pass the microphone to Gerald, but a big round of applause first for the speakers, please. Thank you.
Let them smash them, smash them.
150 years ago, Victor Hugo said, "Insurrection is always a thing of the spirit, a moral phenomenon. Insurrection is an encounter with the truth. It is the place, the only place, where political truth is visible. Insurrection does usually not begin with a tribunal, but it's an essential moment of insurrection, this tribunal that we're doing here. Each of the 4 discursive performances of HOTHOUSE culminates in what we call iconoclastic acts, dishonor tyrant idols, a tribunalistic ritual in which we smash and deflate some of those who threaten fundamental rights and livelihoods. In our first performance, we took down Ludwig von Mises, Elon Musk, and Kevin Roberts for the anarcho-capitalist, anti-democratic, and sociopathic hate they've been promoting and now enforcing. Today, we will rid ourselves, artistically at least, of another 3. These opponents are not only ferociously against democracy and human rights, they also support AI systems that enable a previously unknown level of control. They weaponize AI against individuals and whole populations. And they use it to exploit any form of matter, because with AI, value can be extracted from almost anyone and anything, anywhere. As an artistic renegade act, Dishonor Tyrant Idols is about the value of insurrection and liberation. What you're going to witness is therefore not an act of aggression at all. It is an act of artistic self-defense against the false consciousness of supremacy and the violence and destruction it initiates. Robert and Rebecca Mercer. Robert Mercer does not speak publicly about his political agenda, but there are 2 quotes that are known. As a scientist, I don't believe in democracy. I don't think we should have even given the vote to women. I don't believe that people are equal. I believe that people should be rewarded strictly according to their productive value, rather than treated as having equal rights or entitlements. Only property owners or people with skin in the game should have voting rights. Robert Mercer is a hedge fund billionaire, one of the most successful people in finance, who is behind a lot of the atrocities we've seen in recent years. He has rigged election with AI data analytics and PsyOps, military way of psychological warfare. He financed a Breitbart News, Bannon and Trump. They both together, they have manipulated voters, and they founded the AI propaganda machine Global Election Management Agency. They are also behind climate change denial think tanks like the Heartland Institute. They're actually massive tax evaders and advocates of the death penalty. And Robert Mercer was also heard saying the only racists today are black people, black racists. Steve Bannon probably doesn't need any introductions. He coined maybe one of the most quoted sentences of the 2010s, flood the zone with shit. Another of his quotes is, politics is war, weaponize the AI narrative. He's also, similar to Mercer, the opposite of a feminist. He says birth control makes women unattractive and crazy. But, you know, even if you think this is all really crazy and nuts, if you haven't heard of Mr. Yarvin, Curtis Yarvin, you're in for some news. Curtis Yarvin, there's a lot of quotes that we could say about him. He's a Silicon Valley techno-fascist, authoritarian ideologist, and far-right political blogger. And he is a massive influence. He's the influence behind Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance, the vice president. Some of the things he openly posts and he really believes in is, there's so many, I just choose some. Democracy should be replaced by a monarchy run by a CEO. Sounds like crazy, you don't take that seriously. But nowadays, we need to take this very seriously. An interesting one is, the only problem with colonialism was that it got nationalized, which was enough. Colonialism chartered company style is profitable. Colonialism as a government department is a disaster. For the underclass, it is crucial to find a humane alternative to genocide that achieves the same result as mass murder, but without any of the moral stigma. Imprison them in a permanent immersive virtual reality so they can experience a rich, fulfilling life in completely imaginary worlds. And the last one I'm going to bring, because it relates to what we are doing here, there's a very famous, very strange idea that's kind of circulating in far-right circles around the world, and Trump is very, he's enthusiastic about it, and Yarvin is the originator. Did I hear someone say beachfront? The new Gaza, developed by Jared Kushner, is the LA of the Mediterranean, an entirely new charter city on humanity's oldest ocean, sublime real estate with an absolutely perfect Apple-quality government. This city will be worth $6 trillion, making every Gazan a millionaire. They can all afford to move to Dubai from the enclave. They will be replaced by Thai Gastarbeiter picking irrigated watermelons in the Negev. I think we've heard enough. Let's continue with the tribunal.
Okay, rejoice. So thank you, everyone. We are going to bring this to a close. We look forward to continuing the discussions about how can we use the right words, the right action, how can we mobilize, how can we work together to fight against injustice, against genocide, against all of these crazy, crazy quotes that we heard that are very much alive. So join us at the bar, and one tiny bit of just advertisement for our unit. We are the Global Unit for Human Security. If you want to follow our activities also in Vienna, we have two, at the entrance there's a little barcode, and by that video on the left inside, there's also another barcode. Register, follow us, and you can also join our conversations in the future. Thank you very much. See you at the bar.
Pleasure.